Hello and welcome back to Metropole Grid. My name is Andre.
And my name is Jeff.
And thanks so much for tuning in. This is Game 8, single-sided Swiss here at KNET's 2023 in Montreal at the Silver Goblin. This event was meant to be a 10-round event, and then we realized, pretty late on Saturday, that's pretty late. So we did 8 rounds on day 1 and then 2 rounds on the second day. So this is the final event of the day, or the final round of the day. So, it's a bit late. People are waiting to go for dinner. We'll see how that impacts the match, but I promise you we're in for a pretty exciting match. Jeff, on the left, ASA Group. What can you tell me about ASA Group?
ASA's really loving the most recent expansion, the Automata Initiative. Having wage workers available to them has been just a huge return to its kind of peak of Netrunner dominance that it had just a few years ago. Having Jeeves back and having a Jeeves that you can use the turn you install it is a huge boon for the deck. It's going to do a lot of the standard stuff of kind of playing some rushy ice into mid-range ice, playing for click efficiency, and using fully operational to do some complete BS, let's say.
We do love some HP efficiency. I think both of us are pretty big fans of it. And it's still really good.
Yeah, if Ob didn't exist, I would be playing exclusively ASA in this meta. It is one of my all-time favorite IDs, despite being honestly some pretty simple overall text. It's just it enables some really fun gameplay, and I think fully operational an early NSG card, I think, takes this ID and just makes it just some of the most fun you can have in Netrunner, honestly.
Now, to introduce players on the left, this is Paul. We're going to see the deck as it unwinds. It has a couple of the new cards in a really important way. Paul, a local player in Montreal, he largely I want to say graduated from startup in the last little while, and he's doing really good at there. He's largely building his own decks and doing some really creative stuff. So really excited to see Paul kicking ass in Netrunner. On the right, this is Josh. I don't know, man, if you've seen this GIF, if you've seen this write-up. Josh was that top 16 or top 32 players from FFG Worlds playing Mushin no Shin. Have you seen that GIF of him sitting at the top tables, pushing his glasses up while he Mushin's cards on the table across from the top tier, competitive, whatever, click efficiency runners? It is so cool. This guy plays great decks.
Yeah, I remember that. Those are some famous GIFs. Here we're running off into a great early ASA start of just install a card, use the ASA ID to protect it, and then double hedge fund. This is just a really solid ASA opening. That said, as the runner, I will say with double hedge fund, the run into this and it being an MIC starts being a little bit sad for you. But in general, I think as the runner, you should be running this early and often because your goal here is to try and slow down the corp as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, Hoshiko does want to run, so you're going to see Naxos for sure to get that card and credit flip on the Hoshiko side. Mind you, that is what Josh is up to today. And remote server, not a lot of people are playing MIC, so I do believe you can face check into that. I think we saw Paul's hand was awesome. Rashida, Wage Workers, Hedge Fund, Hagen, I think it's the ice. Off the top, can't tell what that is. I think it might be a drafter.
Okay, I thought it was an Ikoa project from where I was standing, but drafter would make a little more sense because I think you never don't steal that, assuming you have clicks left this early in the game. So drafter makes some sense.
So because Josh knows the text on drafter.
It's true. It could be an alt art, or it could just be a mind game. This is maybe something you should practice for Worlds. Is just pulling someone's card, just to get a close read of it, just so that they can't get a good read on you. Okay,
that's a really good idea. Double gamble to match the double hedge fund. So getting an early fermenter too, that's the combo you want, and rolling in your back pocket. Hoshiko's gonna flip. We do have to watch out for those viruses. Those are somewhat common, and we'll see if the remote server, that's the Rashida, which is exactly the gas. There you go. 3 cards, 4 cards, 3 credits means, again, you love cards in hand for that sort of all those options you have when it comes to ASA Group.
Yeah, and as ASA, you're also pretty happy that you got away with the Rashida for free. You also didn't have your hand checked at all, which is also very nice. I generally, if running R&D and running HQ is the same cost, I would usually advise running HQ. It has a higher density of agendas typically, maybe not always this early in the game, but HQ tends to give you, knowing that the contents of HQ tends to tell you more about what the corp is going to be doing than what the top card of R&D is, even though you're seeing the same number of cards.
Yeah, it also comes down to what you think is in the remote server. If you think there's a Rashida in the remote server, you know they're going to break that sort of lock. So while you do gain some information, you're not going to stop them. Like they're still going to draw cards you haven't seen. So you get some information, but not the whole picture of what their hand looks like next turn. So yeah, I think HQ is usually the place, but we're going to ace a group up another server, ice up R&D, and HQ is not iced right now. So whether that means there's only one agenda, if at all, we're going to see if Josh can find a nice way to on tempo check that. A dirty laundry, even a raindrops cut stone, maybe you might see there. But that's probably the easiest place here to get an access.
Yeah, I'm really curious about what's in Paul's hand because to me we saw wage workers, I believe. So I would always be going for like, how can I get the triple install wage workers? Even just click for a credit, just because I want to get, wage workers is going to be a value over time card for a lot of these ASA engines. But we're seeing for Josh just steel skin, drawing some up. It looks like drawing even more after the steel skin. And then going for an access on HQ.
Did you notice how Paul checked all his ice before the access? What do you think that means? You think there's ants around? Audacity in hand, 4 influence. Huge card you don't often see here. That might mean this is a faster, like the sort of, combo wage workers deck. Sometimes the sports metal type ideas. We haven't seen enough to say that, but that's an interesting include. It's not very common in these lists.
Yeah, it immediately makes me think of CTZ's list from Cascadia. He was running, I think it was just 1 Audacity, but I don't remember. It might have even been 2, where it was just like, I'm going to rush, and I have a really strong fast advance closer, which can include fast advancing Ikawas with a Biotic and an Audacity and a Wage Workers. Actually, I guess you don't need all of those. You just need any 2 of those, I think.
Yeah, but a lot of flexibility, even to get agendas out a bit cheaper. Like, it's kind of seamless launch, but it gives you that fast advance as well. Now, Unity hitting the table in terms of the code gates, you're expecting Magnet early. That's kind of awful to break with Unity. While you hit a Gatekeeper, that's also kind of awful because it will be 6 strength. Like, I don't think you afford to break it. So
no.
We'll see if we just want to get that out of hand because we have some better options in the near future. But installing your breakers gives their opponent a bit of, ability to play around it. They understand how safe the remote server is, but that's a wage workers. We might see it this turn if we can get that triple install.
Yeah, this was one of the Unity install, I think, is one of those things that's like shows the biggest difference that's like kind of subtle between games in this rotation, games in the last rotation, where basically instead of installing this Unity, Josh would be up another 3 credits here and a whole extra card because it would have just drawn up and discarded his Black Orchestra instead. So like we're seeing a huge tempo loss for the runner by installing a breaker that honestly you don't want to use. And like I almost wonder if people are a little bit overvaluing the end game strength of Unity and ignoring like just how bad it is if you need to actually break code gates early.
Yo, 2 influence. Let's play a shibboleth. Am I right?
Yeah.
No, but for real, it's like that is a hard card to use early. Now, Paul there rewound the turn, got the wage workers down out of hand. And again, that's the beauty. You talked about this, how this is not the Jeeves model Biroids of old. It is something that you can get down mid-install and it knows what you've done on the turn. So we're getting that 3 install turn. And now totally loaded remote server. You're expecting the Mana Garm and a piece of ice. And here, with only 8 credits, not that easy to contest. You're expecting there to be, in terms of barriers, ablative. Brawn is a bit of an expensive res. You do need to force the corp to spend some money sooner than later, but not too sure what the second server would be there.
Yeah, I think this is one of the things that can be the hardest for players as the runner to kind of get over their fear of like most of this HB ice is not going to make back the tempo it's going to cost the corp to res it. Like HB still has some of the best tempo forward ice, but this early in the game, the only thing that's going to fire are going to be drafters and gatekeepers, and you should try and make the corp actually go and spend those on your terms rather than on their terms. And so seeing this much unresed ice on the board, you're pretty happy with this as ASA. That said, Awaken Plant this is the ideal state for Awaken Plant, an uniced HQ, Josh can just start going to town, charging up this wake, and going for some big R&D accesses, which, just like a lot of scoring corps right now, are struggling with the fact that R&D is going to end up way more dense in the late game than it was in the previous meta where we had a Global Food Initiative. Oh, but it looks like there's going to move the Formicary. So we've now seen 6 influence spent on Wayland cards, and Formicary coming in asking, are the 2 cards in your hand worth this access.
I think it was such a tell when Paul's looking at all his ice on the table while there's an uniced HQ run. And I love this, like that, Formicary, we'll see some interactions with it, especially I think now after we're going to get triple advance and it's the card that you probably are most excited about in the last set.
It's gotta be Luminal, right?
Oh no,
or
even
no,
better.
Is this 4 advances?
It's a Stegodon.
Oh no, it's Stegodon.
So Stegodon's here with a wall of text on this one. So in short, I don't think the card is going to hold up on the screen long enough to read this. All ice breakers get -2 strength if something has been de-res during a run. I think that's what the text comes out to. But also importantly, once a turn when a run initiates, you're allowed to de-res an ice on a different server that the runner's running. And if you do, you get a credit back. So you're going to start seeing that Stegodon, that Ant, the Formicary juggling, where the idea is, okay, if you run R&D, I'll de-res the Formicary, and then I'll move the Formicary over, and then you'll have to hit that. There's some unintuitive interactions when it comes to other stuff like, mind you, Spin Doctor remote server, but unintuitive interactions when it comes to things like Managarm Skunkworks, which you're assuming is probably what's the upgrade in that first server closest to HQ. So we'll see how Josh can deal with this, because this is a pretty new archetype that hasn't really popped off. It wasn't very common across Continentals. I do think we saw some like near top cut performances with it, but it's a tricky deck to pilot. But in some ways, actually, it's a trickier deck to run against because it really punishes unoptimal runs. And it's like when ice shows up out of nowhere, that's a really hard thing to kind of, map out sometimes.
Yeah, so the big thing I found against these Stegodon decks is like you want to pick 1 or 2 servers and just try and hammer them into the ground.
Yes.
And you often can get away with that because the Stegodon decks end up being really slow to score out because they have to now, like they've scored a 1-pointer and they're usually full of 3-pointers and then, usually like a Luminal and then 3 Stegodons. And there's just like so many awkward scoring patterns you can line up with, and they have to be pretty telegraphed in a lot of cases. So you have a lot of agency as a runner to not make runs unless you know they're going to matter. And then, making sure that you're just applying pressure to the corp in the way on your terms rather than on their terms.
Yeah, I would kind of describe it something like quicksand. The more you struggle, the worse it gets in some ways. If you can make some focused runs and target, one server so they can't get the Stegodon ability and generate a lot of value, it's hard for them to deal with it. Now, that being said, it's now up to Paul to kind of, do that sort of judo misdirection where he has to build different targets in different servers, which is something, ASIC Group can probably do better than most corporations to make sure that he can constantly be de-resing their Formicaries, moving things around and forcing Josh into some ugly situations. I think a big thing here is understanding what the killer is going to be, because right now, Formicary, it gets okay, broken with Carmen coming at a 2 strength, but as soon as you lower the strength of Carmen, it gets really ugly really fast if you don't want to just take the net damage, which mind you is always an option. And I don't know if you're afraid that the deck is going to have Snare or something to punish that. So we'll see what it is. I think you want Noom in this matchup more than you want Carmen.
I mean, I think I honestly would say you want Mimic or you want Revolt. To me, I think people are way overvaluing the simplicity of Carmen over the actual needs of what the meta asks of your Sentry Breaker right now. But I'll make that a Jeff's corner on the stream or something. But
Archives
yeah,
run.
So
sorry, go ahead.
Archives run. I think the Archives run was mostly to boost to Kobe and turn Hoshiko back on.
Boost the Cleaver, you mean, right?
Good at least.
Or sorry, boost the Unity.
I would assume the Unity. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we do actually see the Carmen come down. I missed that in hand. I'm not super high on this breaker, but it is probably the easiest to play boostable standard Sentry Breaker. And the nice thing here is Paul chose not to de-res the Formicary on the Archives run, which is a thing that quite possibly could have been correct. And so now there's no de-res option available because the only ice that's resed is on HQ. And so it really is correct probably for Josh here to run this Formicary or run HQ, I should say, as much as possible before more ice comes down.
Yeah, and getting some good value there. I think that might have been last click. So we're going to flip for Hoshiko. We've been out for a while, but understanding now that HQ that's a pretty high value run. You're getting through for free because it's only 1 credit and you do have the Trickster Taka. You are going to be getting that Awaken Plan charge, which is something you can capitalize on later to see multiple cards from R&D. So here I do think Paul either needs to push in a remote server to force that Formicary to maybe be de-resed or to Ice of HQ is slightly better than that. we saw in archives, he threw away an ablative barrier, and that's a card that, on its own, you get through for 1 credit, but it is something that in the mid game, once somebody hits that threat 3 threshold, is an absolute nightmare, potentially with Stegodon. I think that's one of the more powerful things, as annoying as Formicary can be.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons you might throw it out is like it can actually be a little bit random in this deck when you get the ablatives online.
Yeah.
Because you're running 1-pointers and 3-pointers, like it can just be that the ablative doesn't come on till the game's almost over. And with the Wake Implant, it's not entirely impossible for the game to be over without. Well, threat 3 is probably going to always turn on, but it might be like not that you might only have threat 3 available for 1 or 2 turns before the game ends in this style of deck.
So Paul lacing something into that server, whether he wants the Asa in front of the server, into the server. We still have the trigger here. I don't know that this is going to be a wage worker's turn, but I do think that's, again, a big thing with these sort of Stegodon decks. There we go, Asa in front, is that the scoring patterns get really ugly. You're often scoring at 4 agendas, and that's quite expensive. Ice on archives, again, just trying to make it difficult to, do that sort of Hoshiko thing. That being said, HQ is now free to run, and you get so much value from it. So we might see another Formicary come marching in. You're still only getting through that one for 1 credit, but Miss Bones is a start. This means we're probably going to contest the wage workers. That turns on the sort of combo that you're kind of trying to deny.
Yeah, I think from my perspective here, this feels like a little bit of a... This wouldn't be the play I would go for, maybe. It's maybe a little bit harsh to call it a mistake. From my perspective, HQ is where the game is right now. Running elsewhere is fine, but it's gonna, it's more likely to cause you long-term problems. Now, again, we're not seeing Paul actually de-res the Formicary, which actually would be like noticeably taxing here, I think. But
yeah, it only costs you 1 full credit if you want to res it later. Gatekeeper, mind you, coming in at 6 strength. That's another really cool target for Stegodon, as expensive it is. I think Paul's realizing he forgot to do the thing here. But now that Josh is broken, I'd argue you've gotten too much information, so we're not going to be able to fix it. I think there is a judge call right now where he's called me over and I've explained, like, no, it's an optional ability. You can miss it. You've gained information. So you're going to have to use that later on the turn, if at all. But the wage workers is going to go down, but it's going to cost Josh a bit. What is it to get through the 6 strength Gatekeeper? You're boosting.
With all 3... We're only boosting it twice now because you've got 3 breakers out. So it's only 4 credits. Yeah. Yep. And 2 of those came off of Taka. So only 2 credits. And so this ends up being a pretty good run for Josh here. I guess a Stegodon D-Res would only make it cost another credit if I'm doing my math correctly. But it does, it would give Paul an extra credit, and it would have the Formicary de-resed, which is probably more valuable than having the Formicary resed on HQ here.
Yeah, so that wage worker is going to go down again. I think the contest of the wage workers here, you're really worried about there being a 4-2 in the remote server. Even abstractly, a 5-3 if you do triple advance into Seamless or into Audacity. There are a couple lines here, so I reckon Josh really wants to get this thing down before the remote server goes and pops off.
Yeah, I think the triple advance into Audacity, because you've seen the Audacity in hand, is probably the reason you're respecting the threat this way, and why this play does make some sense. To me, I'm like, you know what? If you get a 5-3, if I can just lock R&D first, then I'm maybe okay with that outcome, with you throwing away your entire hand. But this came out really well for Josh, and honestly, maybe because you have all 3 breakers out, it is just correct to go and contest the wage workers. It's going to slow down Asa a lot. It costs you very little because of the power of Miss Bones. And here we see the Stegodon flip. Can't be the Formicary, which I'm sure Paul would have loved, but he does get his credit value. That Gatekeeper's probably never getting rest again, so basically he got a 2-credit Gatekeeper. And now it is much more annoying for Carmen to get through. Yeah, now this is 3 credits instead of, an extra credit on the Gatekeeper. So I think the missed trigger actually was beneficial here for Paul, if we want to consider it missed, right? Because now you're actually, if you want to take 2 net damage, is that worth 3 credits? Honestly, right now Josh has no economy on the table to speak of. He has lost 2 Fermenters so far, lost and spent. We're way far away from Liberated Counts, no daily cast, no Dream Net, mind you, and now another Formicary comes in. This is what I'm talking about, the sort of quicksand. It's like, okay, I'm barely getting in. Now you can't get in unless you take 2 net damage, and you've already spent 3 credits up front. Yeah, I think unless my hand's golden here, I actually probably don't mind throwing away some cards. I'm going to, in the future, run HQ for 2 credits now, and I'm probably going to try and avoid running non-HQ servers for as long as I can get away with here.
Yeah, it's good that they're stacked because you're totally right. As long as something else doesn't get res, you're running this for 1 credit every turn. It looks like we're just bouncing off, so just in click for credit. Hoshiko, mind you, is going to be draining your credits for card draw. You're really hoping to get a dirty laundry here, but then dirty laundering archives can be pretty difficult. Triple advance,
Are
it
we
looks
scoring a
like.
second Stegodon? Oof. I almost don't like it. It is annoying, obviously, because now you're giving all the breakers.
It's huge.
You're giving all the breakers -4 twice a turn, which is hugely annoying for the runner. But at the same time here, Josh can just run HQ, and you kind of did nothing with your turn as Asa here.
I agree. I think there's a window here, but then the numbers get so hostile. The fact that it costs you, what is it? How much money do you have to spend to get a cleaver through an ablative, right? Like if you can set up a board state, it's now 5 credits to get through a Formicary. It is gross. Now, one thing you definitely have to keep in mind here, and this is a really important thing that if you're not running last click, with a lot of this ice, like Formicary, you can just bounce off of it. So if you're figuring out like, oh, this run, it cost me 5 credits to get through a Formicary, if you just let it end the run and come back, Stegodon is only for that run. So as long as you keep that in mind, there's ways to play around it, but the math gets really gross with these 2 breakers, Carmen and Cleaver specifically. So I'm actually kind of stoked to see how this Stegodon Mark 8, if we want to call it, how disruptive it can potentially be.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I just saw a Bankar go into hand. If so, that's a card you definitely want to get down sooner rather than later so that you can get it on. Though maybe I mistook it for, there's a lot of Anarch cards of that color palette, so
yeah,
might be tricky to see. We are seeing a moshing here. So for moshing, Mom might have been what I saw, actually, given the color palette. And a hippo.
Expensive. Yes, that
Interesting to get rid of a hippo here.
Yes. I'm pretty sure that means Josh has another one in hand because that is such an important card in this matchup. If those ants again are going to keep marching across the table, you trash one of them, you've basically freed up a lot of pressure on all sorts of different servers because that's the only ice in the history of the game with this unique, annoying power. So trashing that's really important. I'm pretty sure Josh will have another here, but no matter what, he definitely needs the money there from the, what's it called, from the moshing. And this is hard. Again, Hoshiko is an aggro deck. You want to be running everything. Liberty counts a really nice recovery there to get back into the credits. But it's hard.
I'm really regretting not getting a Hoshiko trigger there because it was actually free off of the 2 Taka credits. Just go into HQ, get Awaken Plant, and get a card draw next turn.
Yeah. I agree. And especially because you want to make sure you don't lose credits to Hoshiko, but I agree. I think the HQ pressure there is super important, especially because it's free and you have 1 good server here. I think now this turn, it's pretty easy for Paul to put something on the table where if you're considering to run that, HQ kind of slips away from you as much as if you move the Formicaries on the remote server, maybe HQ is free to run. We'll see how it goes. Drop.
Yeah,
I think you got an Aqua, shuffling his hand. Love it. Not every player does that. Kind of really important to make sure you obscure what you've drawn so you're not just clearly playing off the top of the deck.
Yeah, that is definitely one of those habits important to get to. The other one that I've had is before you make the click to draw, decide what you're going to do based on every card you could draw. Because I've had games, and actually Ian in after our finals in Cascadia was like, yeah, I knew you drew an agenda because you stopped to think for 2 minutes after drawing. And I'm like, yeah,
that's right.
I mean, that's just how it goes. 6 credits here.
We need a fully op.
This game has become really scrappy all of a sudden. We do need a fully op here as Asa. The Stegodon is maybe going to be some long-term econ if you can bait the runner into going after your remotes. Yeah. And if they don't, hopefully you're getting off more Rashidas.
So if, this is a bit maybe easy to miss, but there is a server off the mat. You still see it on the camera. No amount of masking tape is going to keep Paul on board. He does want to go horizontal with the ASA group, so that's just going to happen. Now Josh just spinning up. 8 credits liberated off the liberated accounts, and Taka getting to a 2 now, so HQ is still wide open. And I don't think you're too worried about the remote server. If it's an agenda, it would go into the first server that has a defensive upgrade, so probably a Wage Workers, maybe a Rashida, but even if it's a Rashida, it would probably go into the first server unless we're setting up a fully op 2 to 3 turns from now.
Yeah, this does feel like we can run HQ twice here. It'll cost us 2 Taka credits, and then it'll kind of cost us the 2 Hoshiko flip credits. I think, though, putting down the Hippo so that we can go through the Formicary. So, yeah, now we can laundry HQ, get rid of a Formicary.
That's huge.
on our way through. This is a really nice turn here for Josh.
Again, he definitely had one of those hippos in hand. Maybe he got off the moshing, but I think he understands how important that is here. So one Formicary down, Dirty Laundry as well. We're going to talk it through the second Formicary. This is a very high value run. We can maybe see a third Formicary come in, but I do think if Paul has an agenda here, at least it would go into the remote server. So at least you're still getting good wake implant value. You're getting Hoshiko flipped, which is very valuable from non-digital to digital. Single access. You want to see the audacity for a third time? Yeah, you do. That's cursed.
You sure do. Yeah. I mean, you're right. There's probably not any agendas in here, but drawing basically, this Dirty Laundry made you a credit. You're also going to get the Hoshiko flips, and you're charging up your wake implant for future R&D turns.
Oh, it's great.
Yeah, it's a fantastic set of turns for you. I definitely, with 11 credits and just a Formicary, I'm really tempted to slam HQ like 3 times and then run R&D last click next turn, something like that. Like, there's ways where that gets ugly. Maybe you have to like spread it out a little bit more.
Yeah, there's going to be a huge turn in the narrative once we hit threat 3. Fully operational as a start, though. Again, that can trigger 4 times. So we're going to do them 1 at a time. Again, you're allowed to do that. So draw 2 as a start. Then we can get up to 6 more credits, up to 6 card draw. Some even distribution of that? I think we're going to go for the money here. So we go all the way up to 11. Again, such a payoff card for 1 ID. It's still playable out of faction, but you love it in ASA. It's really, really fun Netrunner.
Yeah. Yeah, I am not looking forward to the day that ASA rotates and we have to find a new way to play fully operational. It's a great card, but it is one that's really it really feels built for ASA in a lot of ways. Even though I'm not sure that was actually the original designer's intent.
While finding that second ice for the remote server, second ice for HQ, excuse me, something for the remote server. Hoshiko, and I don't think we mentioned this. This is 2308 ban list, so DreamNet is alive, but you saw those cards like, Maw, cards like DreamNet are kind of difficult to get the full easy value, right? Like you can DreamNet archives so easily. ASA Group doesn't want to ice up archives a lot, but as soon as you start playing with those Stegodons, it does become a bit more difficult to get those value runs. And I don't know how you Maw in this board state. It's pretty hard.
I mean, honestly, install Maw, run HQ, I actually think is not terrible for you here as the runner. Yes, there's going to be some ice that's maybe going to get a bit funky, but you have 10 credits with, I think, 2 charges left on the Liberated, if I'm reading that dice correctly.
Yep.
So you've got actually quite a hefty bit of econ along with the Taka. So, I'm pretty happy to start. Like, Maw is how you really disrupt a lot of these HB decks as Anarch. The Wake Implant is going to be part of that, but denying them resources from hand is also a big part of slowing them down.
There you go. We finished off. We got 8. Speaking of those dice, that hasn't been mentioned on the channel. You see so many players play with these specific metal dice. These are from, oh, there you go. There's a Maw too. I do think we're going to send it HQ. What was this thing called? It was the Player Circuit ANRPC?
Yeah, I think so.
Did you play back then?
Yeah. I did not play in the ANRPC. I did play back then, so I knew of it. And then I picked up these dice, I think at like some Crown of Servers or like Sovereign of Subways style events, which... There's one coming up in New York if that's in your travel area. I actually don't know if these sort of dice will be available for that, but those sort of team events are coming back, are quite fun. So I would definitely encourage, if you can make it out, to try and make it out for those.
So Maw, HQ run, finally sing a different card. That's a hog and a barrier that in a late game you might be able to de-res that and feel not so bad about it. If you haven't seen how Maw worked, again, luckily we have these die. It's the one card in the history Netrunner that requires you to have a die because you actually have to randomize the discard while still knowing where the Hagen is, the card you've accessed. So now Josh and obviously the Corp knows that the card discarded was not possibly the Hagen, which is pretty important information.
Yeah, Hagen is not really it's mostly there probably for Amakuas and fermenters, and so it's pretty dead in this board state, and it's kind of, you'd rather have ablatives. And this is one of the interesting things I think about HB right now is you actually have too many cards you want to run in every slot, and so it's an interesting balancing act. Okay, so we see a Wage Workers triple advance, and then here comes the audacity to discard the rest of the cards in HQ. This is actually one of the reasons. Yeah, I mean, this is one of the reasons that Maw can be good is you can sometimes deny these. These
that could have been hit.
Scores, but hitting the audacity or just even taking them so they don't have enough cards even in hand can be a a line for you for some Anarch players, but usually that's when you're pretty far ahead. So we see Taka come down. You're definitely stressing a little bit here as the runner, but with a triple wake counter, there's definitely some things where I'm like, okay, this is probably a turn where I have to run the Spin Doctor and then run R&D, and it's going to be unfortunate that I have to do all these things, but I just need to lock the top 3 of R&D, or top 4 even, and just be quite content. But
yeah, we're sending it straight to R&D. I do think you're totally right. You either want to run the Spin Doctor or run Archives, because there's a big chance there might be 3 points out of the game, and you need those back to the deck. You do have the play of like run R&D, run the Spin Doctor, run R&D again, if that's what you want to do with the most of your turn, but there's some incentive here. Now, Paul checking his face down cards. You saw he shuffled them together. You're totally allowed to do that. It's in fact recommended. That's the best case here. And now at threat 5, and a Blade of an R&D can be kind of ugly, maybe building you a board state, but not an awesome board state, as much as you only have 1 card in hand.
yeah, actually, I guess that's Josh could be trying to snipe out this Spin Doctor because, it is technically correct for the Corp to go, oh yeah, I'll spin back, I'll use my Spin Doctor preemptively. I think there's some stuff that might break that math. And in fact, I think probably Rob could have thought about de-resing his Formicary, then resing the Drafter to make this cost an absolutely ungodly amount of credits for Josh. And kind of getting ahead. But Stegodon, it's playing around these Stegodon lines is very tricky for both players. So
yeah, it's hard. Again, now Drafter not in a great place against Carmen. You're already paying 4. If you de-res, you get -4 strength. So -2 strength Carmen, you have to boost. How many times do you have to boost? You have to boost to 3 and then boost to 6. So it only costs 2 more credits. That's still quite annoying for 3-cost dice. And we're going to dive in. We're going to see a lot of cards here. Off the top, Mana Garm. You're pretty sure there's one in their mode server 3 to trash again. We have no econ on the table, so you have to be a bit sparing with your economy, but not a great top deck there for Paul. Vovo coming up. Threat 4. Vovo stays, only 2 to trash. We're going to go even deeper again. 4 cards. Maryland. No, these are not great hits for either player. Fully operational, though. 4 cards down. That's a full whiff. 5 points down. Again, now we're checking archives.
Yeah, I'd be okay if we had spent 1 counter, like maybe 1 counter on the wake, but spending all 3 seems a little bit it's going to make it difficult to kind of keep an R&D lock here. As Paul, you actually are pretty happy. You know that none of the top 4 cards are ones you want, so you can actually just pop the Spin Doctor to put a Spin Doctor and a fully operational back in the deck. And be
or you can even ride this
that.
out. Like, you're down to 2 credits. There's no threat that the runner can put off besides clicking for, like, there's not that much they can do besides the wake implant charges, so that you can actually click for credits and wait until you get to like a fully op that kind of, gives you the gas to get out of this board state. But the game is entirely safe unless there's a shuffle. So we'll see. Again, the economy we haven't seen any economic like assets, no Nikos. We saw Maryland coming up. Another fully op coming up. Again, obviously Paul doesn't know those cards. And now we're checking the wage workers here. Again, Stegodon is an econ card here. We can de-res the Drafter pretty safely.
Oh, yeah, actually, we're going to de-res the Formicary so that we can now move the Formicary if need be.
Oh, I think I might have misspoke. When you de-res, you only get 1 credit because that is ability is per ice. Okay, you don't get 2. You get 1, but you do get -4 strength.
Yes, so the Carmen is now -2, and the Formicary can slide in for basically a cost of effectively 1 credit, which is pretty good. And then cost the runner quite a bit more to go
just
and
moving it
actually
over.
handle.
I mean, this is actually so goofy.
Yeah, it's definitely correct to move the Formicary that's known and in a position that you don't want it to be to slide it over somewhere else. So we said it's 5 to break this Formicary. I feel like you take 2 net here. I don't like.
Or you jack out a run back. Because that's the thing. It's like, so Josh went through it. He paid 5. I think you're pretty safe here as long as you have the clicks left to just like run back because it saves you 4 credits for a click. And this is the sort of play space of Stegodon gets really difficult to parse. Fermenter, though, that's a huge install. Again, we just checked archives, so we saw them a virus. It's not coming off the top of the deck, probably not on the table, so you can greed that for a bit. And you also know that unless the Spin Doctor gets popped, you don't have to do much for the next couple of turns because there's just no way to see cards that do anything for the corporation.
Yeah, this is a nice state for you as the runner. The biggest challenge is like you want to run back to HQ here, right?
Yep.
But you kind of can't because the Formicary just gets de-rezzed, and suddenly you have that sort of Damocles hanging over you. And it's kind of tricky for you to figure out, how do I kind of push forward to start advancing my win condition, because I need those wake charges to close out this game. But I can't really afford to go for any runs right now in this particular board state.
Adds a paladin coming down. We got 2 companions. We're flipping out of Hoshiko, so we're going to save some credits, trade those for cards. That Maw, again, we know the cards that we're hitting off the Maw are not particularly valuable. I believe it's a Mana Garment to a Vovo. Vovo is obviously not bad, and it actually does translate the Stegodon into like raw economy if you're continually resing your own ice over and over again. So something in the remote server, you know that 100% that's either a Mana Garment or a Vovo. Vovo makes way more sense here. And then just click for 2.
Yeah, Vovo is a nice little card here for the court because it's, well, res, Mana Garments are free, Maryland's for free. Like, it reses a lot of stuff very free or for cheap. I almost wonder, actually, if the Vovo there implies that that second ice is the third Formicary.
Yeah, it's a really wild interaction that ice can come backwards on the server as a surprise.
Well, yeah, it's also, you get to res the Formicaries for free if you because Vovo reduces on the server that it's on, so you res it on the server and then slide it over. So that's probably why the Vovo is sitting over there.
So it's worth noting we're about 35 minutes into a 40-minute round. That's a really important, thing to keep in mind with looking at Paul's 5-0 board state. So there's a lot of work that Josh has to do in very little time, while also knowing that still, I think it's the top 1 or 2 cards on R&D are totally known if he can't force a shuffle. So not that you play to time. Generally, that's not a thing that you're meant to be doing at tournaments. People don't largely do that, but understanding that, you have to get at least 5 to 6 points to not take 0 points from this game. So that's a lot of work to do and not a lot of time. We're charging this. Again, I think you know what this is. You know every single card on top of the deck.
Yeah, this is a bit of an odd charge where, you can actually know exactly that this is either Mana Garment or Vovo, and I don't think you care about either of those nearly as much as you care about running HQ here. Because, you need to be able to see. Now, the nice thing is, to see 6 points, you probably just need to find 2 agendas, which is not too difficult to do. But we see, once again, Stegodon gets used, gain a credit, -4 strength on the icebreakers.
It's damn quicksand. Now, you might be able to jack out here again. They can still res the outermost ice. This is the beginning of run trigger. And then you can, again, go HQ. But I think you're totally right there. We're going through the first Formicary for 2 net damage. But yeah, you're totally right. It's about that wake implant. You need to see as many cards as you can. And that's the only way on this board state we're generating more accesses. 2 cards, Liberate and Daily Cast. They're going to be...
It's a lot of econ going down the drain, but you might not actually have that much time for them to be relevant anymore, though it does feel a little bit hard to say that. And yeah, it is, in fact, the second Formicary just basically getting res for 1 credit, sliding back down. So this has cost the Corp nothing, and it's going to cost Josh probably another... I actually think you just end the run here. You're not going to go and chase Vovo or Zeddy here, I think.
Yeah, maybe you don't need the cards in hand, but again, those are cards you can spend running HQ. And that's the problem, right? Once those Formicaries get de-res, they're going to be ending up on R&D and HQ when you run them for free, let alone gaining credits. So we're going to go through 2 more cards here. A Hannah, there's Stargate, more multi-access. Those are going to be ripped up. So Vovo, trash cost of 2. We're looking for a 3rd Formicary. I think it's in the bin, Paul.
No, I think it's on HQ, right? Because it was HQ for a little while was double Formicary. Oh, no, but you're right. It did get binned. Yes, you're right. It did get hippoed. Okay, so Vovo goes down to Miss Bones. And, the nice thing here is those Formicaries will cost real credits to res. Ma is not going to trigger here. I think the players are just discussing that.
I worry with time is, Paul doesn't have to do much with his credits besides just res, 1 or 2 pieces of ice. And again, you do get some money back with that de-res. And again, now you run R&D. It can be 2 Formicaries, each only costing you 1 credit.
Yeah, and it's now hard to run HQ last click because the Formicaries can just move again with the last Stegodon trigger.
Now, Hosh going to get that access again. That does sweeten that run on the remote server. And we're drawing into here, I believe it's a Maryland. So if we draw once more, we're at fully op town, if we've been tracking correctly. And that is a big thing where Paul can push as soon as he draws into that fully op, because he draws naturally off of it pretty heavily. There's also some incentive to trash the Vovo on the basis that it does deny fully op, but it looks like Managarm on R&D. R&D is looking really unapproachable. And then Maryland in the remote server we're tracking.
I actually wonder if you want to put the Maryland in the other server just to kind of sweeten the deal of running the non-Formicary servers. Because the Formicary, like, as the
You
runner,
want them de-resed.
yeah, the server you want to run the most is the one where the Formicaries are, because that's where the least threat's going to be.
So Josh, again, time is coming up pretty quickly here. We probably only have about 2 to 3 minutes left. You might be hearing me yell in the background, but there you go. I think you found it right. You can dirty on this remote server for, I think, pretty free with Taka. Spend a bunch of those stealth counters to get through the double Formicary. It should be a Maryland. You can still trash that if you want to. It's going to cost you 1 real credit. Interesting card too. This doesn't always come into play, but you can in theory res Maryland and then over install on it for a shuffle if you need to break R&D lock. That might matter in the next couple turns, but we're just about to break R&D in 2 turns. So
Yep. So we see Miss Bones trash the Maryland. I'm not sure I'm wild about that. I feel like there's maybe a better, like saving the Miss Bones for a whatchamacallit, a Managarm Skunk Works would be my preferred use of those last 2 credits, I think. But we, it's not unreasonable, and we are just trying to see digs to try and set up. But really, we need to be putting pressure. With the Stargate gone, we really have to try and find a turn where we can hit HQ 3 times. And that's very difficult to do from this kind of board state.
Now, no cards in hand too, playing around Maw, getting that Managarm down on the table. That Steel Skin as well is like another card you could keep in hand if you want to just like send it through the Formicary and actually gain tempo from it. But it looks like we're digging for something else. Gatchbon. Again, I do think Josh is speeding up here. I think 2 minutes in the round has been called. You see, trying to play a bit more aggressively. Daily Cast coming down a bit cheaper with the Paladin Puemo, so it might be actually credit positive in the next couple turns. That one does take you a couple turns to pay off better than clicking for a credit. So we drew fully up here. Paul has some options. Again, if he just gets an agenda into remote server, like we didn't talk exactly about the Formicary Managarm combo, but he actually can score out if he can draw up pretty heavily and find that last 3-2. Maybe there's a Luminal in the deck. We're assuming there's always a Luminal in the deck.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest problem here is, like, if you do draw into a 5-3, it's going to take you, basically this turn plus 2 more turns to score it out.
Yeah.
Now, I think you're completely safe to do so. You're kind of guaranteed that it's going to cost 10 at twice, if not more than that. So it's not like you're under a ton of threat. But I think this is kind of a principled understanding your position on the board state of, given the time on the round and just how far ahead you are. Yeah, you don't have to do anything. And like, even if time wasn't a consideration here, not drawing is okay because the runner is pretty locked up here. Like they're, and so you're just waiting for an agenda to show up, but you're like, the runner is under their obligation to put work in here, not you.
Yeah, whatever you top deck, you jam in a remote server. You don't have to mass draw and maybe draw 2 agendas. One gets mod, something, your board state can, or at least your points can slightly slide over towards the runner. We did find a twinning. That makes a lot of sense with these companions. That's a 3rd multi-access card we see in the list. I'm a huge fan of twinning. I think twinning did so well at this event as a flexible way to like get good value runs against some of the more glacier IDs, to be able to generate pressure while setting up. I'm a much bigger fan of the twinning I am now, as opposed to before Candance. It did quite well.
Yeah, it's almost like, it was good enough to be put in a busted tier at some point. But no, it's a solid card, and it does quite a bit of work, especially in these metas with Anarch when you have all of these little drip cards. It to me almost feels like we're maybe a little heavy on multi-access here, but at the same time you need to find it in time, and we only found the Wake early. Maybe we could have, Josh could have played the Wake a little bit more aggressively. I think we maybe missed probably 2 or 3 counters that maybe could have been achieved. But at this point, twinning is nice because you can charge it without running here, which is a very important aspect of this board state where, the HB player is not giving you a lot to work off of. HQ is completely clean. R&D is going to be an absolute bear to get into. So...
Yeah, we'll see
an
here.
Uphill fight for sure.
Yeah, you are going to get the counter for free. Managarm, Formicary, we might see that interaction before the game is over, but I feel like the amount of time that Josh has slowed down on his turn, I believe time has been called. So if it was on Josh's turn, It actually probably is on Paul's turn, which is why he can comfortably say fully opt for credits, nothing else. So I'm assuming Josh knows that this is his last turn and he needs to find at least 5 points. Now, 3 of those points are going to be wrapped up in IKWA projects. That's a click and 2 credits. So that already limits what you can do on the turn. Managarm is 5 credits or 2 clicks. I think we might be considering an R&D run. It's clearly the entire game here is in that one server.
Yeah. I did see a pinhole threading in hand, so I think it's something like click 1, pinhole threading R&D, click 2 and 3, and you hope to find a non-IKWA 5-3 and then an IKWA 5-3 and hope that that is enough to get you the game. Breaking Drafter is going to be an absolute pain because you're going to go to extremely negative strength on Carmen, and you cannot afford to let the Drafter fire and reinstall the Managarm. So it's a tricky one.
We're going.
It looks like we're charging straight into R&D. Formicary D-Res, I mean, this is why I think you kind of have to pinhole the Managarm and just like hope and try and tank the stuff through. This Drafter, you know, another way you could think about it is this Drafter is kind of effectively strength 7. I think.
Well, it doesn't matter on Carmen, right? It's still 4 to break. I think you need a D-Res 2 if you can, if I'm not mistaken, because it's now the Carmen is 0 strength, the Carmen boosts for 3. So the math on this actually doesn't change. It's more so that you can move the Formicary.
Yeah,
over.
Carmen is minus 2 strength here. So you have to spend, but yeah, you're right. You still just spend 4, 5, 6 to break.
Oh, you're right. You have to boost. Yeah, it's -2. So yeah, it does cost 2, 4, 6. Yeah, that's a lot. You still have money again. 3 credits is not enough, so you have to like double click through the Managarm, and if you double click the Managarm, you're off of IKWA, which is actually maybe you have a bit more reach here because you do have the credits off the Taka.
Yeah, you have just barely enough, but you can't really steal an IKWA here, I think.
Yeah, you're 1 credit short. Assuming that you spend 5 credits for the Managarm, but you know the Formicary Managarm interaction is going to happen. So for 2 credits, that's the Managarm. Now, whenever the runner approaches, this is really important. You have to pay 2 clicks or 5 credits. Now, if there's another when approaches trigger, you can choose the order of those. Then I promise you there's another when approaches trigger. So you pay for the Managarm, then you move the Formicary, you encounter the Formicary, and that pushes you backwards away from the server. And then you have to do the Managarm again once you get through the Formicary. It is a really gross combination that's a bit unintuitive. A lot of players, take umbrage with it. And there you go. Gonna spend 2 clicks. There's a Formicary. Again, that's 5 credits to get through unless you want to go ahead and take 2 net damage, which is totally doable, and then you need another Managarm. So the best you can do here, if you have cards in hand, is you can see 2 cards on R&D with no clicks left.
If you can see like a luminal and a send a message, you can tie up the game here, or 2 send a messages. Yeah, see, this is where I'm like, the pinhole threading would have been very valuable here, right? We basically have a whole extra click and an extra 5 credits here, potentially.
So 2 cards off the top. I don't know if this deck is running any other 5-3s besides IKWA. I think it's probably on off-world offices and, of course, the 1-pointers and the Tranquility, but we'll see. We have a shot here. Again, with only 1 credit, no clicks. Mavirus off the top.
And we didn't spend the twin encounter. Oh, I guess we did. We just haven't taken it off. And then Rashid off the top. So yeah, no, agenda's just buried. I mean, like, this is one of those things where it's like, well, also, you had a person playing a slow lockdown Corp card and they drew 5 points in the top half of their deck. So that is probably going to favor the Corp overall if they're playing some kind of lockout strategy.
Yeah, that's a worst case scenario again. I know I mentioned this as quicksand, it can be. There were still servers, there were still ways they can get that value that accesses, but exactly as you said, 5 points is all we saw that entire game, which that's, it's going to be really difficult as a runner to try and get away with that. But well played to both players. So this is round 8. We are not going to see Paul again. On the left, not going to see him until the top cut. He did make the top cut. I'm not sure we have any games, but this Formicary deck made it to the top, so we're going to see Stegodon at top tables. But otherwise, shout out to Josh again. He was playing a really mean PE that again I'm a bit upset we didn't get to see on camera because he plays some really mean trap decks, and it's always really fun to see when he's playing some personal evolution. But good game to both players. Jeff, thanks so much for joining me on this one again. Do you want to shout out your channel real quick?
Yeah, thanks again for having me on, and people should check out my channel. It's YsengrinSC on YouTube, and I'm trying to get back into putting out videos a little more regularly, and if not, you can catch me streaming most Fridays at about 7 p.m. Eastern.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. I'm generally in chat there watching when I can. Love the videos. Once again, thanks for joining me, and don't go anywhere. We'll be back with some more Can Nats. We got 2 more rounds to determine who's going to make in the top cut. Thanks for watching. Ciao. Hey, thanks so much for watching. We got that Stegodon action we wanted to see on top tables. So a bit of an interesting, tricky trap deck. You see those Formicaries running around. The Managarm interaction didn't show up as important as that is. So definitely a hard thing to defuse. Shout out to Paul from our local meta, a relatively new Netrunner player. He's kind of graduated from startup in the last year or so. So it's really cool to see him hit top tables, and he made the top cut playing that list. So we might just see a bit more of it in top cut. Again, huge shout out to Josh as well, just a mainstay of the Toronto meta playing competitive trap decks. He's played a very interesting personal evolution as well, which unfortunately did not make the camera, but such a great guy as well. Again, thanks to all these names here. These are just some of the people that support the channel to make this sort of content possible. Again, takes a lot of time, and the support, having these folks, you know, want to support Netrunner content is absolutely appreciated. Huge shout out to all the Daily Cast patrons as well. Thank you again also for Jeff YsengrinSC, content creator. His links are in the description. He's been putting out great stuff. He has a video that just recently went up about transitioning into standard, some of the most important cards. Check it out. All the links are in the description. We'll be back in a bit. Again, we have one more stream coming up before Worlds, and then it's a really exciting time. So keep your eyes on that Null Signal Netrunner Twitch channel, where Worlds is just a couple days away. Thanks again for watching.